I'm Alex, and today, I bring you a story that will make you question the very meaning of family. Imagine dedicating 10 years of your life to giving your parents the perfect home, only to return one night and realize, you no longer belong there. That's exactly what happened to Emily Carter, a woman who sacrificed everything to secure her family's future, only to be cast aside the moment they no longer needed her. But Emily didn't just walk away. She had a plan. And by the time her family realized what they had done, it was already too late. Stay with me, because this story is one you won't forget. For over a decade, Emily Carter, a 34-year-old senior marketing strategist at a major pharmaceutical company in Boston, had lived with a single goal in mind: securing a forever home for her aging parents. Unlike many of her peers, who indulged in European vacations, luxury apartments in the city, and high-end dining experiences, Emily lived in a modest one-bedroom rental, carefully budgeting every paycheck. Every late night at the office, every weekend spent working instead of socializing, and every promotion she chased had been for one purpose: to buy a house where her parents could retire comfortably. Her parents, Robert and Diane Carter, had spent most of their lives working tirelessly to provide for their two daughters. Robert had been a well-respected high school principal, known for his strict but fair approach to education, while Diane had worked as a librarian for over 30 years. Now in their early 70s, they were looking forward to a peaceful retirement. But their current reality was far from ideal, cramped in an aging apartment with creaky floors, outdated fixtures, and barely enough space to host family gatherings. One evening, Emily overheard her parents talking in hushed voices over dinner. "Maybe we should start looking at smaller places," her father sighed. "But we've lived here for so long, Robert. I always thought we'd have a home where we could spend our golden years, where the girls could visit, where we could finally relax." That conversation had never left Emily's mind. She knew her parents would never ask for help outright, but she also knew how much they deserved better. While her younger sister, Megan, lived her life freely, jumping from one failed entrepreneurial venture to another, Emily had always been the responsible one, the one who could be counted on to do what needed to be done. After 10 years of careful saving, Emily finally had enough for a down payment on the perfect house, a stunning colonial-style home in the upscale Newton district of suburban Boston. The house stood proudly with its white-paneled exterior and deep navy shutters, nestled on a quiet, tree-lined street. A beautifully maintained lawn stretched out in front, leading to a spacious backyard overlooking Crystal Lake. Inside, it boasted 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a grand fireplace, and an open-concept kitchen that she imagined her mother filling with the smell of freshly baked pies during the holidays. When Emily signed the mortgage papers, her hands trembled slightly. The $3,500 monthly payment was steep, but she had planned for this. She had worked overtime, sacrificed luxuries, and built a career strong enough to shoulder the financial burden. This house was not just a property, it was her way of giving back to the people who had given her everything. The night she handed her parents the keys, her mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. "Emily, this is too much," Diane whispered, eyes welling with tears. Robert, always the practical one, nodded approvingly, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do this, sweetheart." "I wanted to," Emily assured them. "You deserve this." For the first time in years, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of pride, not for a promotion, not for financial security, but for finally repaying her parents for their sacrifices. Yet, something in her mother's expression nagged at her. While Diane seemed touched, there was an unmistakable glint of excitement, almost like the thrill of acquiring something prestigious. Emily brushed it off, telling herself it was just the overwhelming joy of the moment. Her sister Megan's reaction, however, was far less subtle. That night, Emily received a text. "Wow, Em. Must be nice to be rich. Some of us don't have a golden ticket in life." Emily frowned at her phone. Megan and her husband, Ryan, had always struggled financially, but it wasn't for lack of money, it was for lack of responsibility. Ryan worked in real estate but had a reputation for making reckless deals, and Megan had spent the past few years cycling through failed social media influencer attempts, investment scams, and passion projects that never materialized. Emily had never been close to her sister, but she hoped the new house would be a fresh start. A place where they could reconnect, where her parents could finally have the comfort they deserved. What she didn't realize was that the house, her labor of love, was never truly hers in their eyes. Blue heart, if this story touched your heart, like this video to show your support. Speech balloon comment 1. If you believe family always finds a way back together. Loudspeaker, share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Bell, don't forget to subscribe for more gripping, real-life stories that touch the soul. Emily Carter had spent the entire day locked in back-to-back meetings, finalizing a high-stakes marketing strategy for a new pharmaceutical product. By the time she wrapped up her last presentation, it was nearly 8 p.m., and exhaustion weighed heavy on her shoulders. As she navigated the quiet, tree-lined streets of Newton, all she could think about was sinking into the plush sofa of her new home, maybe even unwinding with a glass of wine. But as she pulled into the driveway, something felt off. Luxury cars, ones she had never seen before, were parked haphazardly outside the house. A brand new Tesla, a sleek black Mercedes, and even a Porsche SUV were lined up along the curb. The usually peaceful neighborhood was buzzing with activity, the air filled with the sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and muffled music. From the outside, the house looked almost unrecognizable. The warm glow of lights illuminated every window, and even the second-floor bedrooms, rooms that were supposed to belong to her parents, were brightly lit. Emily's stomach tightened as she checked her phone. No texts. No missed calls. No explanation. With her pulse quickening, she stepped out of the car, gripping her key tightly. As she approached the front door, a wave of unfamiliar voices drifted out, casual conversations about stocks, real estate deals, and designer brands. Then, just as she reached for the handle, her phone vibrated. A notification from Instagram. Her mother, Diane, had posted a new story. Emily tapped it open. The first image made her breath catch in her throat, a lavish dining table spread with catered gourmet dishes, lobster, steak, caviar, and an extravagant cheese board. The next slide showed a brand new Italian leather sofa set, the caption reading, "A home fit for luxury." Then came a video, her mother, sister, and a group of well-dressed guests raising their champagne glasses, toasting to new beginnings. Emily's hands turned cold. She shoved the phone back into her coat pocket and pushed the door open. Inside, the scene before her felt like a surreal nightmare. The once cozy living room had been completely transformed. The furniture she had carefully selected was gone, replaced with high-end designer pieces straight out of an interior design magazine. The display cabinet where her mother once kept sentimental family heirlooms vanished. In its place stood an excessively large liquor bar, stacked with expensive bottles of whiskey and wine. Emily's eyes darted around the room, trying to make sense of it all. Strangers in luxury suits and cocktail dresses mingled effortlessly, holding delicate flutes of champagne. Wait staff, dressed in crisp uniforms, weaved between guests, refilling glasses and passing hors d'oeuvres. And standing in the center of it all, her mother, Diane, swirling a glass of wine with an air of effortless sophistication. The laughter, the conversations, the clinking of glasses, it all blurred into a deafening hum. Finally, Diane turned and spotted her daughter. "Oh, Emily," she called out cheerfully, her voice laced with amusement. "You're home early." The room fell momentarily silent as 24 unfamiliar faces turned to stare at her. Emily, still in her business attire, suddenly felt underdressed, out of place, a stranger in her own home. "What is this?" Emily's voice was firm, though her throat felt tight. Diane's smile didn't falter. She gestured around with her free hand. "Just a little housewarming. You weren't planning to move in here full-time, were you?" Emily felt the air leave her lungs. Before she could respond, her younger sister, Megan, appeared at her side. Draped in an expensive designer dress, hair styled to perfection, Megan held a champagne glass like she had been born into wealth. She smirked, eyes glinting with something between amusement and triumph. "Relax, Megan purred. Mom and Dad deserve to enjoy life. You're always so uptight, maybe you should try it sometime." Emily's grip on her purse tightened. "Enjoy life," she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother stepped forward, resting a manicured hand on Emily's shoulder. "Sweetheart, we've decided it would be more fun to live with Megan and Ryan. Young energy, you know. Parties, social events, networking opportunities. It just makes sense." Emily could barely process the words. Her heart pounded in her ears. "So what about me?" she finally managed. Megan let out a breathy laugh, taking a slow sip of her drink before answering. "Well, you're always busy with work, traveling, doing your career thing. We figured you wouldn't mind if we, actually used the house." Emily felt as if the floor had been pulled from beneath her. She had spent a decade sacrificing, saving, giving up everything for this house. For her parents. For the family. And in the blink of an eye, they had rewritten the narrative, as if it had never belonged to her at all. Besides, Megan added with a fake pout, "There's still space for you. We cleared out the storage room upstairs. Figured it'd be good enough if you ever decided to stay over." Storage room. That was all they thought she deserved. A bitter taste filled Emily's mouth as she swallowed hard, forcing back the sting of tears. Her parents, her own family, had not only taken her home but had made her an outsider in it. From the living room, a fresh round of laughter erupted. Someone raised a toast. The clinking of glasses filled the air once more. The party continued, unaffected by her presence, as if she was nothing more than an afterthought. Her fingers trembled as she turned away, stepping back toward the door. No one tried to stop her. In fact, as soon as she reached the front steps, she swore she heard Megan's mocking laughter echo behind her. That night, as Emily sat in her car staring at the house she had worked so hard to buy, something inside her shifted. She had built this home with love. They had turned it into a playground for their entitlement. Her hands curled into fists. They would regret this. Emily Carter sat in her car outside the house she had spent 10 years working to afford. The glow from the grand windows illuminated the street, the laughter and chatter from inside muffled by the thick glass. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel as she replayed the conversation in her head, her mother's dismissive tone, her sister's smug smile, the way they spoke as if she were a guest in a home that she had bled for. The betrayal was sharp, but the worst part was that she had never seen it coming. She had assumed that giving her parents everything would make them appreciate her. But now, as she sat in the driveway, watching a party unfold inside what was supposed to be a place of love and comfort, she understood something crucial: they had never seen this house as hers. She wasn't family to them anymore. She was a resource, a provider, someone who worked long hours so they could live comfortably, so they could parade around in a lifestyle they hadn't earned. They had never respected her sacrifice because, to them, it had always been expected. As Emily unlocked her phone, her instincts kicked in. She needed to see just how deep the betrayal ran. Scrolling through her mother's Instagram page, she found dozens of posts about the house, none of which mentioned Emily. There were glamorous shots of the newly decorated living room, reels of catered parties, and captions filled with hashtags like #LuxuryLiving and #BlessedLife. There was not a single acknowledgement of the person who made it all possible. Then, she checked her sister's profile. Megan had been documenting everything as if she were the star of some reality TV show. A post from 2 days ago caught Emily's eye, a picture of Megan standing in the foyer, champagne in hand, with the caption, "Finally living the life we deserve. New home, new beginnings. We deserve." Emily clenched her jaw, the bitterness settling in. She scrolled further, her stomach twisting as she found even more shocking details. A photo of her father at a luxury car dealership. A post of her mother lounging at a high-end spa. A story of Meghan flashing designer shopping bags from Newbury Street. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about the house. They were spending her money. The realization struck like ice in her veins. The mortgage, the utilities, the expenses, they were all under her name. And yet, here they were, living recklessly, making luxury purchases, throwing elaborate parties, all while assuming she would continue footing the bill. Her heart pounded as she opened her banking app. The numbers didn't lie. A $7,500 charge for luxury furniture. A $12,000 payment to a high-end interior design firm. Endless charges to five-star restaurants, spas, and boutiques. And then she saw it, a car loan for $110,000 under her father's name, tied to the house. Her vision blurred with rage. They had used her credit to finance their fantasy. For a moment, Emily couldn't breathe. Then, she did something she had never done before. She let go of the guilt. Her entire life, she had been the responsible one. The one who did what was right, who put family first, who never questioned when they asked for more. But now, looking at the evidence in front of her, she saw the truth. They had taken her love for granted and turned it into a blank check. If they wanted to live a luxury life, they could do it without her. Her hands were steady as she opened her email. She contacted her real estate agent, the same one who had helped her close on the house. The Boston real estate market was booming, especially in Newton. A home like hers wouldn't stay on the market for long. She drafted a request for a discreet, expedited sale. She didn't need top dollar, she just needed it sold. Fast. Within minutes, she got a reply. Miss Carter, given the current market, we can secure multiple offers within 48 hours. She took a deep breath. This was it. The house she had dreamed of giving her parents would no longer be theirs. And when the time came for them to face the reality of their choices, they would have no one to blame but themselves. Emily looked up at the house one last time. The party was still in full swing. Her mother's laughter echoed through the open windows, Meghan's voice carrying over the music, bragging about the new life they had created. They had no idea that by the time the next mortgage payment was due, this house would no longer belong to them. Emily smiled to herself. Let them enjoy their delusion for a little while longer. Because when the reality hit, it would hit hard. A week had passed since Emily Carter made the decision that would change everything. The house was already under contract, sold for well above its original price, thanks to Newton's booming real estate market. She had handled the process quietly, avoiding unnecessary confrontations, waiting for the perfect moment to let her family face the consequences of their actions. That moment came on a crisp Saturday morning. Emily sat in her office, sipping coffee as she reviewed the final transaction details. The sale would close in 2 weeks. That meant in just 14 days, her parents, sister, and brother-in-law would be forced to vacate the home they had so confidently claimed as their own. She leaned back in her chair and glanced at her phone. 14 missed calls. Her mother, her father, Meghan, and even Ryan had all been trying to reach her since early that morning. A smirk played at the corner of her lips. They must have finally received the notice. With a deep breath, she grabbed her keys and headed toward Newton. When she pulled into the driveway, the chaos was evident. Her mother was pacing on the front porch, still in her silk robe, her hair unkempt from what must have been a sleepless night. Her father stood near the curb, angrily muttering into his phone, no doubt trying to find a way out of this mess. Inside, through the large front windows, she could see Meghan frantically typing on her laptop, her perfectly curated influencer life crumbling around her. Emily stepped out of the car, and instantly, all eyes were on her. "Emily! Finally, you are here," Diane cried, rushing toward her. Tell me this is a mistake. Some sort of clerical error. Emily raised an eyebrow. A mistake? You mean the house sale? Her mother gasped, as if the very idea was impossible. You wouldn't sell our home. Emily crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly. Our home. Funny. Because last time I checked, the mortgage was in my name. The bills? My name. The deed? Also my name. And yet, for some reason, you all decided to redecorate, throw lavish parties, buy luxury cars, and act like I didn't exist. So tell me, Mom, what part of this house belongs to you? Her father, Robert, finally stepped forward, his face pale with rage. Emily, this is completely unacceptable. You can't just throw your family out onto the street. You threw me out first, Emily shot back. Or have you already forgotten the part where you decided Megan and Ryan were better company than your own daughter? When you turned my room into storage? When you told me, to my face, that I was never planning to live here? Megan stormed out of the house, her phone clutched in her manicured hand. Her face was flushed, her usual smug confidence now replaced with panic. Emily, do you have any idea what you've done? My followers think I live here. My brand is built around this house. You just... Emily held up a hand, cutting her off. Your brand? Do you even hear yourself? This isn't about your brand, Megan. It's about the fact that you and Ryan have been bleeding me dry for months, using my credit, my hard-earned money, as if it were your personal trust fund. You spent over $150,000 in a single month. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Ryan, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice laced with desperation. Look, Emily, we can work something out. Maybe we can refinance, or, I don't know, you could help us cover the mortgage for just a few more months. Emily let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. Are you serious? Help you cover the mortgage? Ryan, the mortgage is gone. The house is sold. In 2 weeks, you're all going to have to pack your things and find somewhere else to live. Silence fell over the front yard. Her mother's breath hitched, and for the first time, Emily saw something real in her eyes, not arrogance, not entitlement, but fear. But where will we go? Diane whispered. Emily let out a slow breath, the weight of the moment settling in. She could have softened. She could have offered to help them, given them some kind of lifeline. But the memory of that night, the laughter, the champagne, her mother's casual dismissal of her existence, still burned in her mind. That's not my problem, she said simply. Figure it out. She turned on her heel and walked back to her car. No one tried to stop her. As she pulled out of the driveway, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Her father was furiously flipping through papers, probably searching for some loophole that didn't exist. Her mother had collapsed onto the designer couch on the porch, staring blankly ahead. Megan was already back on her phone, no doubt trying to spin the story for her followers. And Ryan was just standing there, realizing that for once, he wouldn't be able to talk his way out of this. Emily's grip on the steering wheel tightened. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. 3 months had passed since the day Emily Carter walked away from her family, leaving them to face the consequences of their greed and entitlement. The house, her house, was no longer theirs. The luxury furniture, the extravagant parties, the high-end cars, all of it was gone. Now, as Emily sipped her morning coffee in her sleek high-rise apartment in downtown Boston, she skimmed through the local news. Her company had just promoted her to Director of Marketing, a position she had been working toward for years. She had escaped the cycle of being the family's provider, and for the first time in her adult life, she was free. But her family's downfall was impossible to ignore. Scrolling through social media, she found that Megan's influencer career had completely imploded. Once boasting a curated feed of luxury living and aspirational content, her pages were now either deleted or flooded with bitter comments. Fake lifestyle. Living off your sister's money. You had this coming. Where's the mansion now, Megan? Guess that new life didn't last long. Emily smirked, shaking her head. Megan had spent years crafting a perfect online persona, but when the truth came out, when people realized the luxury wasn't hers, it all crumbled. Without the mansion as a backdrop, brands pulled sponsorships, followers turned on her, and her influencer dream collapsed overnight. Ryan, the ever-charming real estate agent, wasn't doing any better. His reputation took a massive hit when clients found out he had lost his own luxury home. Word got around fast in high-end real estate circles, and soon, he was struggling to make commissions. No one wanted financial advice from a man who couldn't manage his own life. Emily knew the real blow had come when the cars were repossessed. One by one, the flashy purchases that Megan and Ryan had made, the Porsche, the Tesla, the designer furniture, all disappeared. Without Emily's financial backing, they had nothing. And then, there were her parents. Robert and Diane Carter, who once reveled in their newfound status among their wealthy Newton neighbors, now found themselves living in a cramped apartment on the outskirts of Boston. Gone were the days of afternoon tea parties, spa days, and golf outings. The people they had once tried so hard to impress had moved on, treating them like a cautionary tale rather than old friends. Emily had heard from a former neighbor that Diane had stopped posting on Instagram entirely. The once social woman, who lived for validation and admiration, now avoided public events, ashamed of how quickly it had all been taken from her. Robert, once a proud and well-respected former principal, had been forced to take a part-time job at a local bookstore. It wasn't about money, he had retirement savings, but pride didn't pay the bills. The loss of status, the humiliation of going from hosting extravagant parties to barely affording rent, had taken a toll on him. Despite everything, they never reached out to Emily. Not once. Until today. A single handwritten letter sat on her desk, its presence unexpected. She hesitated before opening it, taking a slow breath. Emily, we took your love for granted. We let vanity and selfishness cloud our judgment, and we lost what truly mattered. We don't expect you to forgive us, but we finally understand now. We miss you. Love, Mom. Emily swallowed hard, reading the words again. For months, she had told herself she didn't care what happened to them. They had made their choices. They had burned their bridges. But the weight of the letter sat heavy in her chest. She set it down and glanced out the window. Boston was alive and moving forward, just like she had. She wasn't the same Emily Carter who had sacrificed everything to make her family happy. She had built something of her own. She had found peace. But still, as she stared at the skyline, she picked up her phone. And for the first time in 3 months, she dialed a number she thought she'd never call again. It rang once. Then twice. Hello? Her mother's voice, quiet and unsteady. Emily took a deep breath. Mom, let's talk. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall over Boston. The holiday season had arrived in Boston, bringing with it the crisp scent of winter and the soft glow of festive lights lining the streets. Emily Carter stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of her downtown high-rise apartment, watching the snowflakes drift lazily to the ground. It had been 3 months since she had walked away from her family, 3 months since she had reclaimed her life from the people who had taken her sacrifices for granted. And yet, here she was, staring at her phone, hesitating. The letter from her mother sat on her desk, the words echoing in her mind. We took your love for granted. We lost what truly mattered. For the first time in years, they weren't asking for money. They weren't demanding her time, her energy, or her sacrifices. They were simply acknowledging their mistakes. Emily had spent weeks trying to convince herself that she didn't care, that she had moved on completely. But deep down, she knew she had been waiting for this, not an apology, but an understanding. Taking a slow breath, she picked up the phone and dialed. The line rang. Once. Twice. Hello. Her mother's voice was soft, uncertain. Emily swallowed. She had imagined this conversation 100 times, but now that it was happening, she wasn't sure where to begin. "Hi, Mom," she said finally. A shaky breath on the other end. Then, a quiet sob. "Emily. I didn't think you'd call." She closed her eyes for a moment. "I wasn't sure I would." Silence stretched between them, filled with words left unsaid. Then, her mother whispered, "I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I just want to see you. If you're willing." Emily's fingers tightened around the phone. For years, she had put her family first, giving everything until there was nothing left of herself. She had been dismissed, taken advantage of, made to feel like an outsider in her own home. But she had changed. She was no longer the dutiful daughter who sacrificed endlessly. This time, if she let them back into her life, it would be on her terms. "Christmas Eve," she said finally. "Dinner. But we meet somewhere neutral. A restaurant." Her mother let out a breath, as if she had been holding it in. That sounds wonderful." Emily nodded, more to herself than to her mother. "I need to go now," she said, her voice steady. "Okay," her mother whispered. "Emily, thank you." She didn't respond. Instead, she ended the call and stared at the phone in her hand. Forgiveness didn't happen overnight. Trust wasn't rebuilt with a single phone call. But maybe, just maybe, there was room for something new. As she turned back to the window, watching the snow blanket the city in white, Emily Carter smiled. Because this time, she was writing her own story. Love should never come at the cost of self-respect. Emily's journey teaches us that family should be built on mutual respect, not blind sacrifice. Giving endlessly without appreciation only enables entitlement, not love. Sometimes, the hardest but most necessary decision is to walk away, set boundaries, and reclaim your worth. Forgiveness is a choice, but it does not mean forgetting, it means choosing yourself first and allowing others to earn their place in your life. True love is not about how much you give, but about how much you are valued.